On this planet, we should not dream of building our houses of ice below the Arctic Circle. We fail to realize, however, that our staunch houses of stone and iron are but the ices of those substances, the only difference being that the melting points of the ices with which we build are so much higher than the normal temperature of this planet that they are to us as dependable solids as the ice of water is to the Eskimo. All of our dependable solids are but the ices of various substances of varying states of dependability, their dependability being conditioned by their own separate locked potential positions. By a study of the table of the elements, one will see that the melting point of the inert gas at the beginning of the fifth octave is minus 271 degrees Celsius, whereas the melting point of the substance in the first tone is plus 186 degrees Celsius. That of the second tone is plus 1280 degrees Celsius. The third, plus 2350 degrees Celsius, and the double tone of plus 3600 degrees Celsius. Going back down the negative side of the scale, the melting point of the substance in the third tone is minus 210 degrees Celsius, that of the second, minus 218 degrees Celsius, the first, minus 223 degrees Celsius, and the master tone, minus 271 degrees Celsius. In every octave, the melting points rise and fall in an orderly manner as pressures increase in their opposition and relax from that opposition. In the midtones alone are there any irregularities in the orderliness of increase and decrease, but midtones are characteristically irregular in all of their dimensions. This does not mean that midtonal irregularities are exceptions to the law. It simply means that midtones are split tones, and the totals of all dimensions of all the split tones in any octave are the constant of the double tone of that octave. In temperature, as in all other dimensions, the variation of heat which gives us what we call higher temperature is merely a preponderance of heat at the expense of its opposite dimension, cold. The constant of energy in all of its expressions is equal in every tone of every octave, the midtones between each tone counting as one tone. All variations of temperature are, therefore, but variations of the opposites of dimension. All variations of dimension are orderly and in universal ratios. The relative temperatures of the planets of this solar system are as much in conformity with the universal ratios upon which the formula of the locked potentials is based as the temperature of the various elements are in conformity with their law. Without the variation of temperature in systems and the masses of systems, nature could not produce her effects of form, but she makes no variation in one opposite of any system without balancing that variation in the opposite dimension of an opposite system. With all of the conditions governing the variation of temperature, standard units of temperature, like all other dimensions, are purely relative and must change to suit every changed condition. One cannot, for example, give the melting point of aluminum as 659 degrees Celsius as fixed and unchanging under all conditions. A pressure of 1,000 pounds surrounding the metal would so change conditions that it would still remain frozen at a much higher point than 659 degrees Celsius. Conversely, by heating it in a vacuum, it would melt at a very much lower point. We, therefore, cannot set our standard units of temperature to conditions prevailing in the sun or any of the planets, and the only way to find the true temperatures existing upon the various masses of this solar system is to calculate them by universal ratios and set them down as a table of standard units of temperature for each separate mass. If variation of temperature varies the apparent ability of mass to attract and to repel, then the temperature dimension should be taken into consideration in writing the laws of gravitation and radiation. Now I begin a new chapter. This is called Expressions of Gravitation and Radiation. Color, the 15th dimension. Every effect of motion is recorded by nature in as substantial a manner as a businessman records his inventory and without chance of human error. As man records his facts with pen and ink in ledger volumes, so does nature record her effects of motion with light in octave volumes. Every effect of motion differs from every other effect of motion, and is recorded with a preponderance of one or the other of the many colors of light. Light is the universal language. The colors of light are the letters of the alphabet. Combinations of the letters of light are the words of the language of light. Simple effects of motion are simple words of few letters. Complex effects of motion are complex sentences and paragraphs with long words of many letters. Every effect of motion is cumulative and repetitive within its accumulation. Every effect of motion in any octave is repeated in sequence in the various speeds of every other octave. A simple effect of motion, such as hydrogen, is written in the language of light in simple words of simple letters, for its history is brief. Hydrogen, 401 plus, has within it the short history of its accumulation of only 3 preceding octaves. The spectrum of hydrogen is preponderantly red, and that preponderance is recorded dominantly in one bright line of red, and less conspicuously in 3 other lines of red, which indicate similar positions, 301 plus, 201 plus, and 101 plus, of lower potential through which it passes in preceding octaves. On the contrary, the spectrum of a complex state of motion, such as iron, is written in the language of light in complex paragraphs of long, involved and complex sentences, words, and phrases. The spectrum of iron is preponderantly orange-yellow. That preponderance is recorded dominantly in its octave line and less conspicuously in 6 other lines of orange-yellow, which indicate similar positions of lower potential through which it passes in preceding octaves. The history of hydrogen as compared to that of iron is like the history of a 3-year-old child as compared with that of Napoleon. All effects of motion absorb light and give forth light. To absorb light is to decelerate its reproductive speed. To decelerate light is to generate it by lengthening its reproductive intervals. To generate light is to draw it closer to its gravitative center. The ability to draw light closer to its gravitative center is the measure of its ability to attract. To give forth light is to accelerate its reproductive speed. To accelerate light is to radiate it by shortening its reproductive intervals. To radiate light is to expel it from its radiative center. The ability to expel light from its radiative center is the measure of its ability to repel. All states of motion which are preponderant in their ability to attract record their preponderance on the red side of the spectrum. All states of motion which are preponderant in their ability to repel record their preponderance on the blue side of the spectrum. If these premises are well founded, it must necessarily follow that the record of states of motion in color must be related to the attraction of gravitation and to the repulsion of radiation. All light is a complexity of all colors. That most remarkable of instruments, known as the spectroscope, separates light into its various colors. The spectroscope also separates different effects of motion into their separate colors.